The Citizen Watch Company is celebrating 100 years in business. And that's no small feat, but if you would have asked me not so long ago my thoughts on the legacy of Citizen, I wouldn't have had all that much to say. I would have given some great compliments. I would have raved about the Suyosa and all of its variants, sure, but I wouldn't have had all that much to say. And then I visited their traveling exhibition. They're calling The Essence of Time. And I met some really interesting people, and I got to see watches from the Citizen collection, like a really well-curated collection of these watches from the past 100 years. From pocket watches to some of the most intriguing and advanced and beautiful digital watches, dive watches, radio watches. I can't even tell you the amount of time I spent truly in awe, kind of amazement of the collection that they brought forth. The excitement in the room was incredible. And I got to meet some really amazing people, including a bit of a horological idol of mine, Mr. Jack Forster. Jack is a writer and historian. Jack is a very nice guy, I've come to find out. And he and I were going to sit down for an interview, actually, and discuss the impact that the Citizen Watch Company has had on the world over the last 100 years. But in listening to him speak, I couldn't help but to realize over the 40-minute interview that anything that I could offer to this conversation would only distract from everything he had to offer on this conversation. Jack is a wonderful wealth of knowledge, and I think that you're going to find over the next about 20 minutes that the impact that this brand has had on this world is far greater than most of us had ever understood or imagined. So enjoy Mr. Jack Forster.
I think that one of the things that is most interesting about Citizen and hardest to do with Citizen is kind of get to know their products on a sort of comprehensive, one-on-one, hands-on basis, where you actually have an opportunity to see these historically important watches, and you have the ability to see these technical achievements in person. So, I remember noticing Citizen watches for sale when I moved to New York in the mid-1980s, right after graduating from college, and of course I've seen a number of them over the years, but in the past, in order to see the kind of collective historical production from 1924 all the way up to the present day, lined up like this, you would have had to go to the museum at the Tokyo HQ. And having this exhibition circle the world, I think, is a really, really wonderful experience for people who haven't been able to make the journey for whatever reason, to kind of get to see how diverse Citizen's production is, how long they've been in business, how many different kinds of watches they've made, and how many technical innovations they've had.
Citizen Watch.
From Citizen ProMaster, rotating compass bezel, auto-repeat fixed timer.
I can't believe that's really you up there.
Citizen ProMaster, for professional use only.
One of the things that is really challenging with Citizen is to kind of sum up what they've achieved technically, because they've been on the cutting edge of just about every major technical achievement in watchmaking since the 1950s, I think. In no particular order, of course, there's eco-drive technology, and eco-drive technology has progressed to an amazing extent since the first eco-drive watches were introduced. Now, prior to eco-drive, Citizen was still experimenting with solar cell watches, with solar-powered watches. They had visible photoelectric cells, solar cells on the surface, and it was a very cool look. Citizen has always been very good at kind of saying, well, okay, we can't hide the technology, so let's make it the centerpiece of the design. But since the first solar watch was introduced, the degree of improvement is in orders of magnitude. The storage cells have gotten much more efficient. The integrated circuits have gotten much more efficient. The drive systems for moving the hands, if it's an analog watch, have gotten much, much more efficient. There have been innovations in, if you look at the seconds hand on a quartz watch, you see it moving in discrete jumps once per second, right? And when it's not jumping, it's still, not too many people know this, and I didn't until I visited Citizen in Japan, the watch is still using power from the battery to hold the hand in place until it's time for the next jump. There's an electromagnetic brake. So every little bit counts when you're trying to save power in a solar-powered watch. So Citizen actually figured out a way to create a mechanism that doesn't draw any extra juice from the battery when the hand is in between jumps, which is pretty cool. And because if you think about it, most of the time the watch is running, the hand is not moving, right? So that power drain is considerable, and if you can figure out a way to save on that, well, you're way ahead of the game. There's titanium. Citizen actually made the world's first titanium wristwatch. And titanium is an almost ideal material for a watch case. It's very light, it's corrosion resistant. I think it's a third the density of 316L steel. It's very, very tough. It's a tough material. The aerospace industry uses it by the ton every year. The SR-71 Blackbird, that super cool reconnaissance plane from the 1960s, had an all titanium body. Stolen surreptitiously from the Soviets, but you get your titanium where you can if it's the 1960s. And Citizen figured out how to make a watch case out of this material, but they also figured out how to solve the biggest problem with using titanium for a watch case, which is that it is not especially hard, and in its raw form and in its natural form, it tends to scratch. So you can make a titanium watch case, but making one to a level of polish that's really consumer ready, where you're making a beautiful object and not just a sort of technical object, that took some doing. And Citizen devoted years and years and years to developing surface hardening and through hardening techniques, alloying techniques for titanium that allowed them to create things like super titanium, which is a hardened titanium case that you can actually polish to it takes a very, very high shine. So you can produce these technically very advanced objects, but they can also be very, very visually attractive as well. Citizen is a very big company, and when I started working with them, I was really expecting it to feel like a very corporate experience. Lots of guys in suits, lots of sort of basic corporate protocol and so on. And what I found out was that the company actually has a lot of personality. There's a general reluctance, I think, in Japanese watch manufacturer culture to overpraise yourself. A lot of the time in the watch industry, if somebody comes up with a really, really minor innovation, they don't have anything else to talk about that year, so they tout that as the greatest thing since sliced bread or since the Lover Escapement. But Citizen really has an internal culture of innovation. They have an internal culture of seeking perfection, and it's not an abstract thing. Like, the first time I had a chance to travel to Japan and visit one of their factories, visit the headquarters, and get to know not just the management teams, but also the engineering and the manufacturing teams, I realized these people have a tremendous, tremendous passion for what they do, and it's very quiet. You don't necessarily see it. But talking to some of the engineers especially, these are people who are incredibly passionate about what they do. And you know what they say, still waters run deep. I mean, you can talk to an engineer who's super, super passionate about figuring out energy savings for an integrated circuit. At the beginning, he doesn't look terribly, terribly interested in talking to you. I mean, engineers are like watchmakers. They kind of would rather be, at the keyboard or at the bench. But once they start warming up, and once they start realizing that they're actually getting some information across that's important to them, the conversation really takes off. And you don't produce this huge range of watches over this long a period of time with this many technical innovations without having people who are deeply, deeply, fundamentally, culturally committed to discovery. And I mean, innovation is kind of a cold term. I think that what really excites the people who work on Citizen watches in the past and, of course, up to the present, is that Citizen gives them the tools they need in order to make discoveries that have not been made before in timekeeping. The sharp end of the spear, the real tip of the spear for Citizen, is the caliber 0100. And I remember when that watch was introduced at Basel World, and I thought to myself, why isn't there a crowd 20 people deep around this watch? This is a watch that is accurate to 1 second maximum deviation in rate per year. This is the most accurate timepiece, the most accurate watch that anyone has ever created or that anyone is ever likely to create. It's very, very difficult to understand how you could improve on that. And, people were just sort of wandering around, not really kind of getting it. It's an incredible achievement. I mean, you think about it, high precision quartz, you're getting into very, very, very small improvements, very incremental improvements. In exchange for the expenditure of a tremendous amount of extra R&D. So going from 15 seconds a month to 15 seconds a year takes a lot. Going from 15 seconds a year to 10 seconds a year takes a lot. Going from 10 seconds to 5 takes even more. And going from 5 seconds a year to 1 second per year, that's like the difference between launching Sputnik into low Earth orbit and making it to the moon. I mean, there's just a huge, huge amount of extra R&D and real passion for precision for its own sake that goes into something like that. One of the things that has made working with Citizen as enjoyable as it is that there's just so much to sink your teeth into. And it's nice when you're talking to an engineer through a translator to have them suddenly get that look on their face that's like, oh, wait a minute, this I might not be talking to a complete idiot. And it's fun, I mean, it's for me to be able to go to Japan and, get to know these incredibly beautiful, but also technically beautiful objects and talk to the people who make them it's pretty wild. This is actually a mechanical Citizen. It's a dual time zone Series 8 wristwatch, and I have a number of EcoDrive watches. This is part of one of the many things that I like and sort of appreciate about Citizen is that their watches are, for lack of a better word, they're affordable. They're watches that really can make a difference in somebody's life. If you love watches, you're fascinated by horology, and you've got a yearly budget of $1,500, you can do really, really well collecting Citizen watches. So this one is a little bit of a change of pace from most of the other watches that I have, which are largely EcoDrive watches, and they're largely technical watches. I have EcoDrive Caliber 1, which is the world's thinnest light-powered watch ever, which is a tremendous amount of fun to wear. Even people who don't know anything about watches kind of go like, well, what the hell is that, when they see it. My first love when I got interested in watches was really mechanical timepieces. And the fact that Citizen has so many offerings right now, up to and including the Citizen, mechanical watches, I think is just a fantastic thing. And it speaks to the diversity of production that they're capable of. And it also speaks to the identity that is kind of part of the name Citizen, something for the citizens of the world to be corny about it. Watching people come to this exhibition who've never had a chance to see this many different Citizen watches before was really an astonishing experience. It reminded me of, when I was teaching neurology and, a difficult subject would suddenly become clear to this room full of people who never thought they could understand something like how nerve impulse transmission works. You get this like wonderful open expression on people's faces. And one of the things that really drew people in, I think, was just how varied the design language is. Like for instance, there's a watch over there. It's one of my favorite watches in the exhibition. It's a calculator watch, and calculator watches can be, kind of like sort of nerdy at best. You have this little grid of buttons that are really too small to press with anything bigger than the finger of a mouse, and it just doesn't seem like, it's like, okay, it's a calculator watch. It's a little bit of it's like stunt watchmaking, right? This one has a circular case, circular dial, and circular buttons set up almost like an old-fashioned dial telephone around the display. And the look on people's faces when they saw that for the first time, I think most people probably have never seen that watch before, and they've almost certainly never seen a calculator watch dealt with in that way before. And they look at it and they go, oh, I was walking around here with some watch journalists, watch editors who I've known, in some cases for decades, who had not had an opportunity to see a lot of these watches before. And they would look at them and they would, another great example over here also is one of Citizen's first radio-controlled watches. So radio-controlled watch, it's a problem, right? Because you have the technical problem is that the antenna has to be a certain minimum size in order for it to be able to pick up the radio frequency at all. And antenna technology, thank you cell phones, has gotten phenomenal over the past 20 years. But you go back to the 1990s, picking up a radio signal from a transmitter that's 2,000 miles away so that you can update the time 5 times a day, like this is a pretty neat trick. And they could not get the antenna any smaller than roughly the diameter of a reasonable sized watch case. So did they give up? No. Did they try to implement a technical, by that I mean Citizen, did they try to implement a technical solution that was a half fix that would create an unreliable watch? No. They said, all right, we've got this antenna. It's kind of cool looking, it's a coil of very, very fine copper wire. And they said, we're just going to put it right in the middle of the watch. It's going to be front and center. So, we're sticking a flag in the ground and saying, this is a radio controlled watch. And the identity of the watch as a radio-controlled watch is right up there for you to see, and it's an intrinsic part of the design. It is engineering turning into art. And turning engineering into art is something that Citizen is really good at. And I was looking at that watch I looked at it several times, and I mean, the general reaction was, oh my God, why don't they just make this again? Like, this is so cool looking. It doesn't look like anything else I've ever seen. If they would just reissue that, I mean, I heard the word reissue a million times, opening night for the exhibition. People were saying if they would just reissue that watch, it would sell like hotcakes. I don't know if that's true, but like, I think it's cool. Citizen's impact is going to be, it's hard to say, because I think Citizen is really just starting to be more widely known. It's taken on just in the 3 or 4 years that I've been working, fairly closely with the brand, I've seen its identity really sharpen. There's a very clear sense now from how the brand communicates about itself, what its values are, what its intentions are, what its design philosophy is like, and where it's going. So I think that, especially given some of the other things that are going on in the market for watches, I think Citizen's time has really come. That's sort of a terrible pun, but the market is for watches is becoming more and more expensive, generally speaking. And when I got interested in watches 30 years ago, you could get a top quality hand wound Swiss watch for around $6,000 from name one of the big luxury brands, and that watch is now a $40,000 watch, and I'm pretty sure it's the same watch. So you can, if you are interested in watches as a subject and you're fascinated by them as mechanisms, but you would actually like to be able to buy a watch every once in a while, it's getting harder and harder and harder to find something where you can look at it and sort of say to yourself, well, this really this scratches the itch, it meets the standard for what's necessary to give me a satisfying experience of ownership. One thing that I've always believed to be fundamental to the experience of buying a watch and owning a watch is you want to buy something that you're going to learn more and more about as time goes by, not something that's going to become a source of frustration and disappointment, right? And you and I have both had watches that we love, and we've both had watches that have been, for whatever reason, a source of frustration and disappointment. And sometimes it's because we just chose badly. We picked something for the wrong reason. Well, everybody says it's nice, and yeah, so why don't I like it, And I think that with Citizen, one of the things that is really going to be impactful is when people realize just how much is there, in the larger enthusiast community, which is really becoming every day more and more identical with people who are clients for wristwatches at all. I think that there really isn't a hard and fast division between enthusiasts and the sort of wider watch market anymore. I think when people realize just how much Citizen has done and can do and is doing, and how much really enormous pleasure of discovery you can find in owning a Citizen watch, I think that it's going to really transform how people perceive not only Citizen but other watch brands in the market in general.
What a contribution to history, to our understanding, to our collective memory of the evolution of technology, of design, of what great minds have been able to achieve specifically over the last 100 years. See? I told you he was good.